welcome everybody to part one of our Reinventing Performance Strategy webinar series. Stop managing the greatness out of your people. Just stop it. Stop managing the greatness out of your people. We want this to be a completely interactive webinar with you all. And so we actually would encourage you to interrupt us as much as you can through Q&A. List your questions. We want to do our best to answer as much as we can in real time as it pops up throughout our presentation today. If we are unable to get to your questions at the end of this, we want to make sure we follow up with you individually, and we'll take a little bit of time at the end to do some Q&A. But just to introduce our panel of my esteemed colleagues here today, my name is Mike Kinsey. I'm the VP over at Titus Talent Strategies, alongside Edgar Jones, Vice President over at Performance Scoring. Jonathan Reynolds, CEO of Titus, and Anthony Piccolo, CEO of Performance Scoring. So we've got a good crowd here today, and really excited to dive in and move forward with y'all today. So the big mission, the reason why we've created Manage for Performance here collectively is we want to turn managers into coaches and teammates into top performers. When you think of managing and leading somebody, it's a completely different process. And when you look at everybody individually at your company, there's got to be performers that may or may not be hitting and achieving the goals that they're capable of. And so our goal and mission is to really help people get to where they want to be and where they should be. So today's topic is going to be, again, stop managing the greatness out of people. There is 8 common people demotivators, some of which that I think are really going to be surprising for you. And so during this webinar, we're going to explore how to, even if you have good intentions, we want to stop some of those behaviors from turning those relationships with your employees sour. Again, pass a note to us in Q&A. We would really love to hear from you. Otherwise, I want to talk about an issue called micromanagement. Anthony, as a recovering micromanager, maybe you can dig into that and why that's
for years. But you know, I'm about 15 years, 12 years, 10 years. Well, so many years past it, hopefully, self-judging anyway. But you know, this one probably isn't as surprising as a demotivator as some of the others. And it's good that it's first though, because I think especially young managers can fall into this trap. They care so much. They have this sincere belief in what they're doing and the people they're working with, and they really strive to see consistent, high quality work. But sometimes that method, you know, can kind of lead to a lot of frustrations. Part of the reason why we created Manage for Performance was this idea that we could get past the, hey, what are you doing right now? You know, like walk me through this stuff specifically, right? Where we could create this objective narrative for people. So when those conversations happen, they're much more intentional and actionable and really helpful. The last thing we want as employees from our manager are the constant questions. I know you know, in the past, it was kind of a running joke. You know, the last thing people want to answer is like, well, what are you doing right now? Like, you know, it's just not an inviting question. And the endless instructions or observations, or worse, you know, they think it's a critique every time or criticism. And it really leaves your people feeling frustrated or, gosh, incompetent. I mean, and you're hiring these people to do a job. And I think even worse is they can feel untrusted. And that's something we really want to keep our people from feeling.
Yeah. And Anthony, I was just going to say, Anthony, didn't you get in trouble with your wife because you asked her what she did today rather than how was your day?
You know, I've been married for almost 13 years, and I learned that about 13 years ago, and then again 12 years ago, and then again 11 years ago. So I'm really working on it.
It's good. Sorry to interrupt, Edgar.
It's okay. It's okay. You know, Anthony, you brought up a great point. You talked about individuals being frustrated. And if there's one thing that can frustrate an employee, is no autonomy, not being able to have the freedom to make decisions. I think we all can battle with this. You talked about a young manager battling with this as well, especially if you've been in a position where you've had to make a lot of decisions and now you have to trust individuals to make decisions. There can be a real fear there. So if you're not giving, if there's no autonomy, basically what you're communicating to them is that I don't trust you and I don't trust you to do your job. And trust is extremely important on the team if you want to be successful. But with trusting your people, you have to understand your people, and we're all wired different. We have different skills, we work different and different behaviors, and that's one of the benefits of M4P, because it allows you to be able to understand your people more. Now, when you're given autonomy, you're letting them make those decisions, but that doesn't mean there's no oversight. Think about Tom Brady. Tom Brady is trusted because of his experience and his skill set. So when he's running a 2-minute drill, his coach is still on the sideline guiding him if he needs to, giving advice, but he's trusting Tom Brady to drive down the field and put the ball in the end zone. And if Tom Brady needs to call a timeout, he comes to the sideline, talks to his coach. Maybe they talk through a problem and work on getting to a solution. So we have to do a better job at giving individuals the freedom to make decisions because they feel valued. They can be more creative. They can be more productive. But as you give the freedom, you really want to stay away from crazy policies and rules.
Yeah. I just flashback now. I worked for a very, very large organization at one point prior to doing what I'm doing now. And I was so frustrated by the constant changing of policies and rules, just constantly changing them. You get to the point where you're like, sorry, what do you want me to do now? What is the new rule on that? What's the new process on that again? And it slowed me and my team down, who are a high performing team. They had hundreds and hundreds of teams around the country, this organization did, and we were number 4 from the top. Like, we were 4th place in the highest production. And I remember at one point being sort of like, hey, you're not doing enough of this. And it was like an activity. I'm thinking, why are you writing me on this? Like, why are you writing me on this activity when we're producing 240% of what our plan was? And it just really demotivated me and the team. I don't know how to lead the team through this, because I'm thinking, just another rule and another policy. Had they told me, and looking back, had they told me why, I would have actually understood the why. It was a good reason why. They never told me. I didn't realize until about 6 months later what they were actually getting at. I'm like, oh, it makes sense now. But I would have given them 120% had they told me the why. And I think there's a lot of times we go through, you've got to have rules and policies and processes, and people have to follow them for order, which is a great thing. But I think often we can do reactionary, we can create rules. And without understanding, we don't even understand why we're doing it anyway. We're just kind of trying to create order. It's almost like, I know this is a bit controversial, but during the beginning of the pandemic, suddenly all of these rules were going out. I mean, you had people doing things which we look back on now. Why on earth are people wiping down their groceries outside their house with a hazmat suit on? You know, we didn't know. Nobody knew what was going on. And some people were freaking out about that. And some people, looking at their neighbors like, what are you doing? And so the people were suggesting things because they just didn't really know, but they're creating rules for people. And it was kind of like, so wait, I'm allowed to breathe with this? I'm not allowed to breathe. How does that work again? And can somebody explain to me why? And when we understand the why, people can go, oh, it makes sense. But when people don't understand why, it just frustrates people. And we do this in companies a lot. And I think just to take it a step back, look at some of the rules you've created, some of the policies you've created. You can't have rules for some people, but not others. But the problem is when we have a high performance culture, you can really suffocate those high performers by putting too much structure and rules around them. Hire people who are smart, who can figure out the greatest way and the best way to get the results you're looking for, and don't just manage. Same as the micromanaging thing. So I think that's a big one we have to watch. The other one is when we look at our employee base and our teams that we have, toxic employees, they can really, really tear apart your company. I understand, we know that, but sometimes there are toxic employees that are performing well. They're performing well, and we're like, oh gosh, we just got to keep that salesperson around because they're just doing so good, but they just bring so much cancer to your organization. And people, like, we can put these guardrails around these high performing people, and we don't recognize what they're taking away from our organization every single day. When people show up to work, whether you're remote or you're in person, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, I have to work with that person. And there's some special guardrail around them. No one's allowed to touch them because they've been here forever, or because they related to the owner, or because they are high producing, and we can't afford to not have them here because we'd lose so much. We don't take a step back and say, what are we losing by having this person here? We're losing morale. We're losing the energy, that we're losing the passion of all of these other wonderful people who probably would be willing to give 120% if they didn't have to work with that toxic person who's just carving away at their soul every day. But seriously, we need to look at some of the people in our organization. If there's a way you can evaluate and say, where's the cancer in our organization that needs to be dealt with? Because we don't just leave cancer, we deal with cancer. We deal with it. And I think in the same way with employees, it's driving great employees out of our organization when we don't deal with toxic employees, underperforming employees, people who just shouldn't have no right to be there, don't living your core values, and really take a step back, because it may be, we're giving you secrets here that our company, Titus Talents, kind of like, we don't want you to know this because we are in the business of headhunting and recruiting. A lot of our services around headhunting and recruiting passive candidates. And one of the things we do is we find that these 8 things, we find the pain for those employees, the high performing ones, and they're like, yeah, it does suck here. My company does keep toxic people around. And we're like, yes, we can whisk you away and bring you to a phenomenal organization. So if you do these 8 things, it'll actually really solidify and galvanize your employees to wanting to stay with your organization. And everyone's dealing with the big war on talent right now. So these things are so empowering for your people to want to stay. So I just think building around the communication of this is really good. When people do leave your organization, I think it's important to say why. Tell your teams why, because positive or negatively, we can all learn from it. And I've been part of organizations as well. People leave and it's just kind of like, where's that person? I've not seen them in a while. It's just kind of like, yeah, moving on. Nothing to see. Just keep over here. You got to communicate around these things, because your top performers will want to keep going further and further and further if they know what's going on. So
keeping those individuals in the dark. Keep them in the dark. When you're not communicating well with your team, it causes and creates confusion. And then after individuals are confused, they start to assume, and assumption usually controls disappointment.
Wow.
And I think we all can do this. You know, we assume, we draw up all different types of scenarios in our head and situations, and what we think based off of the lack of communication that we're getting. And when you have a lack of communication in your company, it can have a negative impact on productivity, working relationships. It can definitely increase turnover as well. And when people are kept in the dark, that's typically how rumors and gossip start as well. People start chatting and start having those internal conversations, and before you know it, something small starts into something. You have a big problem in front of you. Think about it in your personal life, with a family member or a friend that you didn't communicate well with, or you felt like they weren't communicating well with you. Think about how you felt. Think about it. You probably thought, well, they don't really care. Or what are they hiding from me? So being able to have clear and consistent communication is huge. And here's the thing: consistent. Because if your team, the only time they're hearing from you is when there's a major problem or big changes about to happen, guess what? They're going to start expecting that when you communicate, there's a problem. So that creates a fear. Think about if you have a family member that calls you and you don't hear from them in a long time, and you pick up the phone, and you be like, hello? What's wrong? Like, nothing. I was just calling to check on you. If we were having consistent communication with each other, then that fear of something is wrong really wouldn't be there. So, I think COVID actually played a big part in showing about communication, how important communication is as well.
It's crazy what COVID did. I think before COVID, and I can say this, I think is, I thought we were doing a good job with communication pre-COVID. And what COVID really showed us is that we didn't communicate as effectively. We didn't share as much information maybe about the team or the organization the way that we could. You know, and I think a lot of this, was really kind of exposed in COVID. It's part of, you know, look at, you know, companies like ours, like M4P, you know, we're existing to help, you know, create conversation and share information in a way that lets people have a buy-in and understand. So when those conversations happening, they're happening more around, you know, objective truths versus like what Edgar was talking about, where it's kind of like, well, I've been in the dark and I'm putting all these things together and I've been looping. Well, A plus B, we don't know what C is, but I'm pretty sure I think I know what C is, kind of situations. And so finding kind of a way to bridge that. And it really brings M4P. You know, Jonathan, you said something a minute ago about information sharing and the lack of it almost as cancerous. And you know what the medicine, you know, somebody once told me, you know, the difference between poison and medicine is dosage. And it gets back to this idea of like the feedback here, you know, recognition and recognizing accomplishments are so critical for all of really for the human condition. And having staying power with those accomplishments is even more powerful. Look, we all like a pat on the back, but some people like pats on the back more than others. In fact, some people really are intrinsically motivated by those pats on the back or those kudos. And one of the things that we really tried to address with M4P is we wanted to give accomplishments staying power. And I was making this is analogous to looking at a picture on a wall. You know, when you have a memory of a great event, you can recall it. Of course, science says every time you recall a memory, it changes a little bit. But when you look at a picture, Edgar walked into my office one day. He's like, "Why are you smiling? Looking at that." I'm looking at my kids smiling at me. There's nobody in the room. But I smiled back at the picture. It created this moment. The moment had more staying power. And that's part of what we're about with these accomplishments. We're not saying don't pat your people on the back. We're saying pat them on the back and let's have a way to, like, you know, have them recall that later. Because in those moments of despair, in those moments of challenge, or like we like to say, opportunity, in those moments, you know, having a recall event, whether like, hey, you know what, I feel like my boss has been hard on me, but I go look at my shout outs board and I can just see all of these instances where my boss took time out of his day to provide a kudos or shout out to me, and where my other teammates got involved and liked it. I mean, the weight of that is so powerful. We want to provide a safe space, a common place for our people to provide feedback on what drives them, what they care about, what makes them feel good. You know, we all want to feel good. It's like gifts, though. We want to make others feel. We want our people to know they're cared for, that they're trusted, that they've got the power to make the decisions we need them to do. You know, if we do this, we stay away from the next demotivator, which is boredom. You know, there's happy people that are engaged, giving feedback. They're probably not bored.
Anthony,
sorry guys,
it's just me. In the office and those memories and that smile that you have. Right? You want to find, you know, boredom. You know, I think anybody can fall into this, but you want to find ways to continue to be creative, because if you don't, boredom will start to occur, especially with the younger generation. You think about this for a second.
Yeah.
When we're trying to bring individuals into our organization, we do everything we possibly can to get them in our company. We show off the best of the best. We lay out the best for them. And then once we get them, over time, we get complacent and we continue to do things the same way. And for everything that you add to your life, you have to maintain and take care of it. You have to. It's the same as you add people into your organization, maintaining and taking care of that. Even think about, you know, Anthony, before you met your wife, when you were dating her, everything you possibly can to impress her, right? And then now we get married. Over time, people just get complacent. So keeping things fresh, keeping things new, switching things up. And I think when you're dealing with the younger generation or an employee that's dealing with boredom, find out what their short-term and long-term goals are. Maybe they need to adjust their schedule a little bit. Actually, you know, sometimes people can run into the problem of, you know, I've hit my goal, now what's next? That's why I think it's important to have a growth plan. I've never heard anyone say that they're tired of growing. Like, I'm tired of growing. It continues to go on throughout the course of our life of growth and being able to challenge ourselves and find out different ways to sharpen our tools. So having that growth plan keeps things creative. The individual can be excited and engaged. And plus, it's very difficult to promote a person that's bored.
So true. I mean, it's interesting, and it's a lot easier said than done now that so many of us are in a virtual workplace, right? It's not as though you get to develop and form these incredible, deep relationships with people popping in and out of an office and grabbing lunch together. It is different. And Edgar, to your point before, especially a younger generation that's never really experienced a professional work environment before, they may be really seeking more touch points, more communication. And it can be really demotivating when people see individuals getting promoted based on how long they've been at a company, or at least that's their perception is, this person doesn't deserve it. They haven't accomplished nearly as much as me. And the biggest way to squash that sort of attitude is making sure that every single role is defined. A big mistake that companies make is not solidifying performance objectives for every single role, so that you're able to look at those roles and say, okay, these are the minimum expectations that we're expecting of you within this. And the way that we want you to get there and to get to performance is allowing us to help coach you around the skills, the competencies, the observable behaviors, your alignment of our values within an organization. All that plays a part into how we should actually be promoting people, so that when somebody ultimately does get promoted, there's no question, because they're probably already doing the next job in front of them, and it should be very visible for other people to see. This eliminates frustration. It is also one of the biggest reasons why people are leaving organizations right now. It's not necessarily their boss, it's not necessarily money, but it definitely has a lot to do with the fact that they don't see themselves with the company long-term, because they don't know what their long-term career path is. And so when they look at something that looks to be pretty bleak and they don't see that you're investing in their coaching and development, there is definitely going to be that perception that people are being promoted based on how long they've been at a company. I like Edgar's story about that person that always calls you and there's a problem. The thing that I thought about was the person that always calls you and you're just like, I know we've been friends since elementary school, but can't you tell that we just don't have that long of a relationship? Duration doesn't necessarily equate to a positive, strong relationship. And so that's a pretty key point that I wanted to bring up. But I think it's also important when we're looking at how to motivate people is being open to failure within your organization, being open to letting people take some risks and take some chances without the fear of immediate repercussion. And I know, Jonathan, that was something you had said early on was, obviously I'm very imperfect at what I do and what I've done historically. And you said, well, why would I get you in trouble? We just invested a whole lot of money in you making that mistake. So you better learn from that.
Yeah. That's a nugget. That's a good nugget.
It is. Well, I think it is. I mean, like, I see this in organizations, and I've learned it in ours as well by trying to figure this thing out. It's like, we're a small company. We don't pay for continued education. We don't do education reimbursement or anything at that point. But we do it every single day when we basically pay people to take risks. We pay people to take risks because we want to get better as an organization. We want to be entrepreneurial. We want to be innovative. And it's not a hierarchical organization where one person has all of the ideas. We hire smart people and we ask them to really, really take risks. So when those things don't go well, they're not going to keep taking risks if we punish people or discipline people or tell them you screwed up, don't do that again. Like, no, I want you to keep screwing up. I want you to screw up again because I want a lot more innovation out of you. I think it's Steve Jobs who said, do you want to hire great people, have them keep working for you? You have to let them make lots of decisions. And you have to let them run with their ideas, not like with hierarchical, but let people run ideas, like let them run with it. Otherwise, you're going to lose them. He also said, don't hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people to tell us what to do. Like, come on now. Like, let's create an environment where people want to take risks and help the company become better without fear of retribution. I think it's really, really important to kind of give people that opportunity. I remember saying something that I was playing around with this, and I'm a little bit of a challenger. So I said, why did you not do that? Why did you not complete that big project? I was like, well, I was kind of afraid to screw up. And I'm like, why are you afraid? Well, that's not our culture here. And I said, you know what? If you don't make a big mistake, like a big one in the next 30 days, I'll fire you. And I was like, I wouldn't really have fired this person, but I wanted them to actually make a big mistake. But the only way you're gonna make a big mistake is taking some risks. And so if you're really, really calculating that, I think this ability for people to fall forward or fail forward is, I think it's some of the greatest companies out there that are really pushing boundaries into new things. They figured this thing out, and for a lot of other companies out there, maybe smaller organizations, learn to figure this out and create a culture where people can take risks, because then they show up to work and they don't know what's going to happen. If people can predict what everything's going to happen at work, that's boring. It just ties into all of these other things. So, all right, back to you, Mike. We can talk for a long time on these topics.
I mean, I know we sure can.
We could have had an 8-part series on this, actually.
Well, that's the perfect segue into the fact that this is, again, the first webinar as part of our series. But we really would invite more questions. Here we've got a few that have come through that we certainly can address. We know that the webinar is officially going to be over in a couple of minutes in terms of the time that we said, but we're willing to stay on, answer some questions. Like we said before, we are happy to get back to you individually as well if we have to wrap up and don't have enough time. But please drop any questions that you have in the chat.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, while you get the questions kind of laid up, maybe I can have a little shameless plug time.
Please.
Is that all right? Well, yeah, we're so excited to be doing this with you guys. This is hopefully you've enjoyed it. And this is, like Mike said, really just the first of many. Our next webinar here is Give Your Managers a 12-Year Head Start. And we're excited about that. The average person has their first direct report at age 40, but doesn't take their first management training class until age 42. How do you bridge the management gap to get the people in your organization up to speed and ready to be the people leader without extensive formal training? And one of the statistics I think we've quoted before, but in the US, we're spending $300 billion a year hiring people and less than $10.5 billion training them up in performance. And so, we got a few takeaways, for this next webinar. We want to, provide, how to best support your people leaders, understanding how to best engage your people so they can engage others. And then the power of coaching versus management. There's just so much, it's a rich topic. And we're excited to be able to share in the wealth of it with you guys and love your feedback. And Mike, with that, any questions we're getting, let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah, we got a couple. So the first one is, how can someone in an HR seat make an impact on an overall toxic culture?
Mike, it broke up for me. I apologize. Could you say it one more time?
Of course. So how can someone in an HR seat, so I'm assuming they're saying they're not part of the executive team,
right, make
their impact in a historically toxic culture?
Ooh.
I'll take a stab at this one, because I've had the privilege of working a lot of human resource leaders over the last 20 years. And I've had this question come up quite a bit, actually. I think when someone is sick and they don't know it, they're just going to carry on living exactly the same way. And so when you start talking about a toxic culture or a poor culture, I remember sitting with about 15 CEOs. They were part of a peer advisory group, and I was asked to come in, and this is years back, I was to come in and speak on the power of Glassdoor. And it was one of those things where these business owners were like, we hate Glassdoor. I wish we could actually write reviews on employees. When's it our turn? You know, anonymously. And I'm like, I get where they're coming from. And I said, listen, you have to pay attention to this, and you have to manage this stuff. And I could tell that they were not really that interested in what I was talking about. So I actually started quoting directly all of these quotes about, you know, this CEO has their head up their butt, blah, 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 blah. And they're all laughing. And then I paused and I said, every quote I just said was from your companies in this room. And it was suddenly like, wait, what's that website again? You know, like suddenly I showed them that they were sick. There was a sickness going on, and they suddenly started paying attention. I want to fix this thing. So I think that question of like, how do you deal with the toxic culture, you know, and you don't feel empowered in your role, maybe, first of all, is to get the powers that be to understand that there is something that's wrong. There is.
And we can help with that too, can't we, Jonathan? We can help with that with M4P.
Yeah.
Again,
I
don't invite me on your talk show, guys.
I was not meaning it in a self-serving way. I'm saying when suddenly people like they change their diet because somebody told them you've got this much time if you don't change. Right. And I think there's a recognition of, hey, listen, the reason we have employee turnover issues, or the reason we're not hitting our financial goals, the reason is, and you can point to the reason, that's how you can make a difference. And then obviously there are great solutions out there to on a mass level to help with the culture transformation, which is essentially, here we go, why we created Managed for Performance. It was really to transform cultures into high performance, highly engaged cultures. So you can't do it alone. You need people on your team.
Right. No, that's really good. I love all the shamelessness that you have, Anthony. This is really good. But
I like to think about it as a gifting.
Exactly, complete gifting. Now, the other question that came through is, this is really relevant, obviously, in the world right now with just virtual and not having the ability to see each other on a day-to-day and know what everybody is doing. And it kind of goes back to the micromanagement piece that we talked about, Anthony. But the question is, do you have any tricks to keep your remote employees goal-oriented and excited about their role within the organization?
I can speak a little bit to this. Edgar, Jonathan, feel free to answer as well. I mean, one of the ways you can stay goal-oriented is keep the goal in front of yourself. Make it visible, tangible, touchable all the time. And we really worked on that at M4P. Part of this is like, you know, the things, the skills and the behaviors and the performance objectives and the factors of feedback, these things that really drive the performance and engagement of our company to really get them excited about the role. We put it in front of them. We talk about those things. They're just front and center. And it really seeds the conversation. In fact, when you're talking, one of the challenges of this is when you do this sporadically, or it's just not in front of your people, those are high stakes, low frequency conversations that can be very scary. And so part of this is like, let's get these things in front of our people. Let's talk about them, and let's always know where we stand. What do I weigh today? I can't talk about what I'm going to do if I don't know where I'm at today. And keeping our people's today in front of them, along with where you hope they'll be tomorrow, really helps provide some guideposts along the way for how they're going to achieve that career path and those things that they desire.
Right.
Another question. Okay. The question is, what do you suggest when the top executive is the toxic person in the organization? I'm assuming that you are not the top executive. I'm assuming you're not the top executive and you're that self-aware. But no, I mean, that is a real. You've got some data.
That question.
Okay, we're not gonna Google some of your companies and find out who that person is. But I honestly, I mean, this is really tough. You know that quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." If you really don't believe that you can bring change, there is an option to leave. Okay. You're so good, you get the choice to work with a great organization with a great culture. And that's one of the things, you know, you have the choice to make. Unless you're in a family-owned business and you're talking about your spouse who is the toxic person. I understand there are some tough dynamics in all of these things, but I think the same comment as I said before, people are not going to change unless there's a reason to change. And if they don't realize they are the toxic person, nothing's going to happen. And so I think if you genuinely care about them, or you genuinely care about the people in your colleagues and people in your organization, I would say it's the right thing to do to gently and humbly, not with an attitude, not with a baseball bat, but you actually come and say, listen, I'm sharing this feedback because I want to stay in this organization and I want to see some transformation here. I will have to leave if not, not as in a threatening way, but they can read between the lines, but actually say, here are some things which need to adjust in our culture. And it starts with leadership. I mean, I think knowing that person, knowing and caring, I think if you think that they would be open to feedback, even asking them, are you open to feedback? And the only reason I'm sharing this is because I care. I like being a part of this organization. I think if somebody came to me and said that, like, listen, I love my colleagues, I love what we're doing here, but you have some blind spots. By definition, blind spots, you don't see them. And so I think to actually say, hey, here's some blind spots that I think you might have. And I'm still committed to you, and I'm still committed to this organization. Now, if this person is not going to be humble about it, and you think that's the problem, they're not going to change, I can go back to that comment of saying, listen, hey, I'm leaving, and this is why I'm leaving. I don't think, I think it's a real serious issue. And be honest. I think a lot of people don't like confrontation, but we can actually help people if we're really honest with them.
Mhm.
So,
really good point, Jonathan. I always talk about this too, is like, blind spot's the perfect word for that, because the truth is like to really affect self change, it requires some self-evidency, right? Like you have to see it. And so without somebody shining the light or opening the door, or the window, or whatever little analogy we want to use, we don't have the opportunity. You haven't created an opportunity for that to be self-evident to that individual. So it does require a relationship, right? You can't have a person you never talk to walk in there and go, I think you're the problem. This organization isn't working. Like you're probably not going to get great buy-in. But if you have a relationship, or someone has a relationship that acknowledges that there's an issue, then you can create the space for that conversation that's not in confliction, then you have an opportunity to really make a difference.
And that's a great point. And Jonathan, you brought up some great points as well. That's what you can control, is your response and what you do with it, and bringing that information to them. And then from there, they have to make the decision to change. They have to make the decision to improve. I can't keep pouring inside something that has a leak. Like you have to fix that first, right? The individual has to want to fix themselves and work on themselves, that they can be able to take that information and continue to improve. And at times they may have a blind spot. They may not know, but building relationships are extremely important. It's extremely important as you're bringing information to that individual.
Yeah, I love the points that have come up so far. And I like the example of the glass door story that Jonathan gave before, and, shining the light on some of those blind spots that you never really maybe had the self-awareness of knowing. And something that we've used internally with the predictive index is very non-emotional, objective data. And that really helps the conversation when you're not emotional, and you can bring in specific examples. You can bring in things outside of feelings that really show the impact on the business overall. And with the predictive index or any sort of behavioral tool, you can go side by side and saying, this is maybe why there's some natural conflicts between, your natural style and other people's natural styles. And the fact is when we're in a position of leadership, it's more of our responsibility to have to adjust to other people. We talk about treat others the way that they want to be treated. Versus the way that we want to be treated is a really pivotal piece in that. The other question that just came through was, it sounds like it's such a daunting task to manage someone to performance, meaning a lot of conversations and data and things that you need to update, most likely weekly. Is there a watered down way that we can start making a change?
Well, and I think we all probably have our own answers for this question. So I think there's some to this answer, but I think so much of this you're actually doing, it's just siloed. And the problem with that is like, you're probably having some performance conversations, whether you're micromanaging or not, right? You're probably tracking some information, whether it's in your Salesforce, a CRM, whatever it may be, right? You're tracking your financial metrics. You're tracking time. Did they show up, right? You're doing some of these things already, but the challenge is the information siloed. And so when the thought recalls, when it's time to make a decision, you're suffering from recency bias, and you're actually not, you're having to create a shared historical narrative, which is really hard to do when you're talking about someone else's performance that's so important to them. So really, when we're talking about, adopting a performance management process, we can't think about it as something new. We just have to think about it as doing it a little bit better than how we're doing it, not more time, the right time. Right. And so much of this is really just about how we think about the actions we're already taking versus, what we think the opportunity is. And I really think that using, whether it's, having something to guide your meetings, having something to manage your projects, having something to really scorecard that your people can buy into, where these conversations are set. And we can automate so much of this. For example, pulse surveys and M4P, just a couple of check-ins like, yes or no, do you have a roadblock this week? Guess what the manager doesn't need to know? No, there's no roadblock. Guess what the manager does need to know? Yes. Well, we can automate that conversation. You're creating trust by just even though it's a little bot in your M4P thing asking you that question, it's positing the answer, the answer that needs help to your manager. And so it really creates additional time. So we love to say we'll save time, and we do, but what we will do, what this process can help you do, is actually make that time more valuable. It's a better use of time. If there's anything else, guys, that was kind of
That's awesome. No, as also a former a recovering micromanager, you can't spell micromanager without Mike, is what I always say. And so the biggest thing that has helped me so much is just making sure that there's an ability to track real-time feedback from numerous different resources. That has been the key for me, is you don't feel like you need to babysit somebody when you know that there's going to be positive and constructive feedback coming from all angles. And then when you do have your coaching conversations, it's based on really a community of feedback rather than, like you said, Anthony, just your recency bias that is going to be trickling in. And that's probably the easiest way to just start the process. It doesn't need to be super objective, but it needs to be honest and transparent conversations.
And so much of this, Mike, is if you can automate some, and we can help you do that, if you can automate some of this data and create a place where your people can have a self-evidency of their place. Most people think that they try hard. Most people think that they do well. And we can actually play on that human condition need by actually giving them honest information. Instead of saying, well, I think I weigh about X, provide them a scale so they can get on it for themselves. It doesn't take any more time. If you think it takes more time, then we can help show you that it doesn't. Right. Let's help them get a scale. And people can do a lot for themselves if they're given the right information.
I know we have a ton of people still on this webinar, so we're way over on our deadline of when it's supposed to finish. So appreciate the questions and comments and people sticking around. I would just add one more thing to that, the question, like, how do you do this kind of baby steps? Any of you who have kids or been around kids, they all need to grow up. They all do need to grow up, and that will happen in time. And we invest in our kids because we want to give them all of the right training so that they can develop at the right pace that would be healthy for them to. And we give them information, we give them feedback, and we give them instruction, but we don't give them all of that at once. We don't go, let me download to you everything you'll need to know to be an adult. And it's the same way in our companies. I think we actually, we look at people and go, okay, day one, I'm just going to tell you everything you need to do to be a VP here. Well, I'm not even a VP yet. Well, I'm going to give it to you now anyway, so that you're prepared. We do like kind of baby steps. We work in days, weeks, months, quarters, years. And I think how we manage this in little bite size is actually saying, let's work on these things over the next 90 days. And we just give one or two things, maybe three, but we're not going to give 25 things. It's just overwhelming. It's and people, that is going to a stifling environment where people feel like there's just this endless list of critiques that my manager has for me. Like, we wouldn't do that in parenting, and we shouldn't do it in the workplace.
And with that thought, that was
That's a mic drop moment. I love it. No, that's perfect. I think we actually got through all the questions and really appreciate the interaction from everybody. Again, this was really our pleasure to put on this webinar for everybody today. Hopefully you found some value in the conversation. Again, this is a one of several different webinars that we're going to be conducting here. We would love for you to join the others. The other piece of it too is if you are interested in checking out Manage for Performance, the M4P software, we're doing a 90-day, no obligation free trial of the software platform, and would really love to have a conversation about that if you'd like. Otherwise, I think we're done, gentlemen. Have a great rest of the day, everybody, and thanks again for joining.